But actually what we found in the business side is that companies are basically going through a very interesting squeeze. Number one, companies don't want to spend more money. There's a lot of reluctance to spend cash, and companies are sitting on more cash now than they have for about 10 years. And the second is companies see rapid business growth. So we're in an economy right now where the economy is growing, markets are growing, companies are worrying about their competition, but the CFO does not want to spend a lot of money. Okay, if you go back to like the late 90s, the last time we had a boom, the internet boom, there was no problem spending money. Every company I worked for just spent money hand over fist. If you needed to hire somebody, just pay more money. Salaries went way up, hit the roof. We're not going through that right now, actually. There's no wage inflation right now. So basically, the pressure that organizations are feeling is we need more people, we need to grow, we need to beat the competition, we need to roll out new products and services, but we can't really spend that much more money. So we have this sort of tightened workforce problem. Added to that, the fact that the labor market itself is tighter. So we're actually in sort of an interesting challenge. And that's really what I think is the crux of talent management in most companies, is this balance between growing markets and growing products and growing services and this reluctance to go out and spend all the money we have on hiring new people because and in many cases, they're just not there. So then we ask companies then, so based on the problems that you told us, what are the talent challenges in your organizations? Now, I just gave this presentation a couple days ago at an HR conference, and one of the things that people said to me was, well, isn't it retirement? Actually, no. Retirement's relatively low. Companies are not really that worried about retirement right now. What they're worried about more than anything else is what I mentioned earlier, gaps in the leadership pipeline. And the reason for that is what I showed you before, is that this hollowing out of the middle age groups in corporations has really created a challenge. So if you're Pitney Bowes and you want to open a new postal service center, you can probably find postal service center workers, but you can't find managers to run the postal service center. Because those are people generally in their 30s and 40s. They have to have 5 to 10 years of experience in that organization or a similar organization, and there just aren't as many of those people around. So you have to train those people, build those people, or recruit them away. The panel that I was on a couple days ago, one of the guys on the panel was the head of recruiting for Whirlpool. And he basically said, a room full of HR managers, he said, okay, I would like to meet every one of you before this conference is over because I'm going to recruit your best people away from your company. And he's right. I mean, that's what they're doing. They are basically, their recruiting function is essentially like a sales function. They're looking for people, they're recruiting them, they're going after them wherever they can find them. And that's one of the issues with this leadership pipeline. The second one I want to just highlight briefly is this issue of a performance-driven culture. Why do you think that was scored so high? If you think about it for a minute, really I think the problem that companies are facing is growing economy, growing markets, lots of competition. We got to get more out of the people we have. We got to get them to perform better. Because we want to grow with the market. We can't hire more people necessarily, so we want to train them and incent them, and that's why pay for performance is such a big topic in organizations right now, and performance management that we're going to talk about the rest of the day. Performance management is the hottest software market in HR right now. It's growing at 60 to 70% a year. And it's not because the software is particularly exciting, and it's actually fairly simple, but the problem is very, very big. Companies are trying to figure out how to fine-tune their management to drive higher performance out of their employees. And there's lots of tricks to that, and it's kind of a black art, to tell you the truth. So these are the issues. And what you need to think about in your organization is you need to go through exactly the same process. What are the business problems and initiatives we're facing, and what are the talent problems that are created by that? And this is nothing really that new if you're in learning development, but I think it's taking on a whole new flavor when you think about it as an integrated solution. This is the Raytheon picture. I won't belabor this, but just a little bit of a story of this. The VP of HR of Raytheon, very smart guy, about 2 years ago realized they were having a hard time hiring. They were getting lots and lots of government contracts. They're probably building God knows what, for the U.S. military right now. And they did a study, and they went around. Raytheon's a very large company. They did a study in their organization. They tried to figure out what are the talent requirements in the different businesses. There's a lot of different businesses in Raytheon. and what are the recruiting and staffing targets going to look like. And they found out that there's no way they're going to be able to recruit enough people. And then they did some demographic analysis, and they found out that a large percentage of the people they need to hire are in cities where there are no universities or colleges graduating those kinds of engineers. So they revamped a whole bunch of things. They're opening new offices in locations where those kids are getting out of school. They're changing their university recruiting program. They're revamping their internal training program, which I'll show you at the end of this presentation. So this problem, which took almost a year to identify, has kicked off a whole bunch of things inside Raytheon, talent management related solutions, to try solve it. And I would suggest that most of you probably have some problem like that going on in your company. You may not know what it is, or you may. Now, the final thing on sort of this introductory remarks is defining the term. If you go back about 5, 6, 7 years, talent management meant recruiting. You go back about 4 or 5 years, 3 years, talent management meant leadership development, succession planning. It was the talent. The talent was the top talent. It was the top 5 or 10% of your company. When I used to work at IBM years ago, I was a lowly sales rep and engineer. I was not part of the talent management program at IBM, but there were probably a couple hundred people that were, and these were people that were in Armonk or Westchester County or wherever they were. That was the talent. People at the low level were not considered the talent. Today, it's really reached out really to touch everybody. The term tends to now connote, in most companies, a general term about the workforce. And these are this just shows, when we ask companies how do they define talent management, leadership development was the number one answer, because people still do consider it to be the top talent. But as you can see, it reaches down into all these other functions as well. So the second thing is, how is that changing HR? Well, I wasn't here for yesterday's speaker. I guess you had an HR executive. But from all the HR organizations that we've talked to, basically HR, and I'll show you the transition why this is true, HR is a bit of a siloed function. HR has specialty areas, and in these specialty areas there are usually groups of people. There's usually a director or a manager responsible for different functions. And they're now called silos. That's the buzzword for this. And silos are turning out to be part of the problem. Because the problem with the silos is, if you want to do something like what Raytheon did, which is understand the workforce demands across the organization and the staffing pipeline and how the development and skills gaps are being filled, there's no one person who has that information. It doesn't exist. It's in 10 people's heads, 10 people's different spreadsheets. Some of these people are not even in corporate. Some of these people are out in business units. So one of the biggest things that HR organizations are realizing is they have to change the way they work and the way they function. I'm going to show you a little bit about that at the end. The second thing that it's changing in HR is that organizations are starting to focus on different things. When you ask VPs of HR where they're spending their time, you hear a lot about organizational capabilities, not individual capabilities. That's the theme that I like to use. We used to be thinking all about how do we make individuals perform better? How do we make managers perform better? How do we make executives perform better? That's not enough anymore. We have to think about how does the organization as a whole perform better, and what can we do across the organization to find those problems and then put together programs and initiatives that will solve them. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. And interestingly enough, on this chart, number 1 was skills and competency management. How many of you would say that in your organization you have a world-class handle on your skills and competencies in your organization? Okay, that's what I thought. Now, I asked that question a couple days ago, and there were about 3 or 4 times as many people, and I think 5 people raised their hands.